Welcome to the Sales Influence Podcast, where we talk about finding the why in how people buy. I'm your host, Victor Antonio, and today I want to talk about your sales process. Is it broke? If it is, we need to fix it. Now look, when I talk to companies, one of the things I realize right away after asking several questions is that the majority of companies don't have a sales process. You may have heard me mention this in past podcasts, and it still shocks me. I just got to keep repeating this thing, that 9 out of 10 small businesses typically don't have a sales process. And as far as large corporations, I'd put the number more at 6 out of 10 don't have a sales process, but yet they don't know what's wrong with their selling. When I work with small businesses and even corporations, it amazes me how much money they spend on all the things surrounding the sales process, getting the facility, getting the offices, hiring the right people, getting the marketing together, everything that has to do with the cost to sell a product or service. But when it comes to where the rubber meets the road, which is the presenter, the salesperson talking to the customer, that's where they spend the least amount of money. And these are the same managers who then turn around and castigate their salespeople because they're not selling. Well, maybe they're not selling because you haven't trained them on a sales process. You haven't defined a sales process. And if you're an entrepreneur, self-employed, then guess what? You need a sales process. Stop trying to wing it. Stop trying to go in there and just kind of guess at selling. When people tell me, look, I don't have a sales process, Victor, I just go in there and wing it, I just shake my head mentally because they don't get it. They don't get it. If you don't have a sales process, then simply you will always be guessing and selling. The problem with that is that when you do make a successful sale, you can't repeat it, you can't be consistent because you're guessing, you're doing it different all the time. Now, many years ago, I remember working for a company, and I didn't believe in a sales process. In fact, I didn't even really believe in a script. But they forced me to use a sales process and a script. Now, when I say script, it's an outline of what I had to say, but I can infuse my personality, in other words, say things the way I said them. And when I use the sales process and use the script with my personality, my sales increased. My close rates went up. But something interesting happened. When you start selling a lot, you get real cocky. You think you're good. You start really kind of believing in your own hype. And guess what I started doing? I started not following the script because I thought to myself, I got this. I'm good. I can do this. I don't need a script. And as soon as I started going off script, and it started happening slowly to the point that I didn't even realize I was going off script because I kept changing little things. You've done this. You've ever been in a presentation, you've done the presentation a certain way, then you start adding little changes. And then you add a couple of more changes over the next few presentations. And next thing you know that over the next few months, your presentation is totally transformed. It's different. And then your sales start falling off and you don't know why. Well, the reason is that you went off script. See, you had a sales process. You had a presentation process. You were following it along. You knew what to say, when to say it, how to say it. But little by little, you kept going off track till one day you realize that you're not closing as many deals. This happens to all of us, the best of us. We start getting into that presentation, and next thing you know, we want to change it. We want to make the adjustments. But what's even sadder is, again, that the majority of companies or businesses or entrepreneurs don't have a sales process. Now, let me differentiate. There's sales process, and then there's a presentation process. A sales process is the high level. We got prospecting, we got setting up the first meeting, we then do a presentation, we try to close, but if it's a longer sales cycle, like a B2B business, we may have to come back and meet with other people, do another presentation, maybe do a field trial where they try our product, and that could take 1, 2, 3, 6, 9 months. So that's a sales process. What I'm talking about is the presentation process. The presentation process is, what do you say? What do you do when you get in front of a customer? What do you say? What do you do? When do you do it? See, this is where most people simply don't get it, that the presentation process is a process. You have to know how to open the conversation. You have to know what to introduce first. that will impact the client. In other words, to grab their attention. You also have to make sure that you create enough pain, enough discomfort, so the customer begins to think rather, I need to consider what this guy's talking about. I need to consider his product or service. And it isn't until you create that sense of urgency within your presentation process that the customer goes, maybe I really need to look at this. And as you're moving through your presentation process, you have the end goal in mind. You know that you either want them to buy the product or service, or you want them to at least give you a trial period. And if you know that that's the objective, we know that that is the outcome we want, then almost like reverse engineering, we should work backwards within our presentation. In other words, build a presentation that leads to that conclusion, that you want them to buy or at least accept a field trial or give you a trial period. And again, knowing how to open, knowing what to introduce first, knowing how to really touch their buttons, right? In other words, talk about how your features, your benefits, your advantages, your gains can help them increase their revenue. Or maybe talk about how those things can help them reduce their costs or expand their market share. Remember the value trinity: increase revenue, reduce costs, expand market share. That's part of the presentation process. But also keep in mind, talking about gain all the time, what you're going to get, isn't always sufficient, because it's okay to talk about gain, but you also have to create enough pain. See, unless the brain experiences pain, it will not change. Let me say that again. Unless the brain experiences pain, it will not change. This is when customers tell you, no, what we have is good enough. When a customer tells you what we have is good enough, you failed in your presentation process to create enough sense of urgency, to create enough brain pain to make them want to make a buying decision. And again, brain pain could be, look, Mr. Customer, by not using our product or service, here's how much money you're losing. In fact, using what you have today, here's how much money you're losing. In fact, your market share is shrinking by this much over the next 6 months because you're not doing these things. Now notice, all these things can be quantified. I can put a dollar value on them. In other words, I can quantify the value of how much money, how much market share they're losing when they don't use my product or service. This is creating brain pain. This is creating a sense of urgency that gets them to say, I need to take action. So when a customer says, I'll think about it, or we're happy with what we have, then guess what? You're not doing your job. You're not quantifying the value, and basically you're screwing yourself out of sales. This is what I'm trying to emphasize in this podcast, that it's okay to have a sales process. That's always necessary, but it is even more important to have a presentation process, to know what you're going to say, when you're going to say it, how you're going to say it, and almost like a conductor with an orchestra. You're conducting basically from the front of the room or even from across the table. And what you're doing is orchestrating the conversation. See, you want to stay away from commodity conversations. You want to move towards value conversations. And if you've listened to my past podcasts, you know that commodity conversations always lead to price pressure and discounting. That's what the customer wants. But when you have a value conversation where you can quantify the value of your product or service, and you can also quantify negatively how much the customer is losing by not using your product or service, then you're having a value conversation. Then it becomes less about price and more about the value you have to offer. So again, have your sales process, if you don't have one today, begin to define one. But more importantly, when you finally get in front of that customer, have a presentation process. In other words, know what you're going to start out saying, what's in the middle, and how you're going to end it, and how you're going to close them and get them to make a commitment. That is how you sell consistently in today's market. That's it for this Sales Influence podcast. Don't forget to leave me feedback on iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube. Hey, by the way, many of you left some great comments, and I really do appreciate it. So know that I do my best to try to read them and respond to them. Also, check out my training website, Seminars on Selling. We have 19 video programs to help you close more deals, okay? Last but not least, I want to thank you for listening. This is Victor Antonio, always reminding you, Selling ain't hard when you know how. Take care.
Every manager can feel it. The difference between a motivated, value-driven sales team and one that's stuck in a rut. CEOs know the difference too. They can see it clearly in the profit and loss columns. The question is, how do you get your team to this elite level? Is there something extra you can do to break through the remaining resistance and equip them with the right mindset to grow your business? Yes, there is. But you're not going to do it with one of those cheesy inspirational speakers or some self-proclaimed guru. What you need is someone with a real business track record to deliver key insights in a captivating way, to give your team the right tools for selling in today's tough marketplace. Enter Victor Antonio, experienced executive, innovative thinker, compelling speaker. He's ready to deliver the message you need your people to hear, not with a canned speech, but a customized, dynamic keynote designed to deliver results. Bring Victor Antonio to your next event before the competition does.